course, Thursday is Thanksgiving. And when I think of Thanksgiving, the first thing I think about is pilgrims. I think that's the first thing we learned in school about Thanksgiving was the pilgrims. We learned this song in the year 1620. The pilgrims came over. The good ship Mayflower brought them across the sea. I remember saying that when I was in grammar school. They did come in 1620. The first year they faced hard times. The next year things looked a lot better. And they had Thanksgiving. And according to the Smithsonian Institution, that really did happen in the year 1621. Now the background of it is interesting. The Pilgrims were Puritans, and Puritans was a religious sect in England. They were Calvinists. At that time in the world, there were many different sects in religion, little groups of people. They were Calvinists because they followed the thoughts of a man named John Calvin. He was the major figure of the Protestant Reformation. Calvinists didn't all agree with each other, but one thing all Calvinists agreed on is they did not like Catholics. Of course, Catholics probably didn't like them either. But one of the things they didn't like about Catholics was that Catholics had a lot of religious holidays. And Calvinists did not believe in religious holidays. They thought the only religious day was Sunday. And the only thing you should do on Sunday was what they considered a regular church service. They didn't have any special days in church. They didn't even celebrate Christmas or Easter. They just didn't believe in stuff like that. But they did have two kinds of special observances. They were not connected to church, though. One of these was called days of fasting. One was called days of feasting. To understand those, we go back to Calvinism. And the main thing Calvinism believed is that God controls everything. Absolutely everything. Now, a lot of people don't realize it today, but up until the turn of the 20th century, Baptists were Calvinists. And that's why you hear so many Baptists talking about God is in control and all. That's going back to their Calvinist background, and a lot of Baptists don't realize they have, but they do. And so they believe God controls everything. And Calvinists believe that God uses his control over everything to give people what they deserve. In other words, if you please God, God gives you good things. If you displease God, he gives you bad things. So if something bad happened in your life, you would automatically assume you had made God mad for some reason. And that's where the days of fasting come from. Let's say something bad happened that affected the whole group. Maybe there was a bad storm. Maybe there was an early frost and the crops were already coming up out of the ground and we had a late frost and killed the stuff coming up out of the ground. Or maybe there was some kind of drought or an outbreak of disease. The people would know they must have sinned, and that's why God brought the bad thing on them. And so remember, they believe God controls everything. Every drop of rain that falls, and if you got sick, God made you sick to punish you for a sin. If a hurricane came through, that was God's punishment. And so if something bad happened, they would proclaim days of fasting for 3 days. And you were supposed to fast. You were supposed to think about all the ways you had sinned, and you were supposed to resolve to quit. And hopefully this would placate God, and more bad things wouldn't happen. But on the other hand, if good things happened to you, like you had good weather, good crops, and a good harvest, things were going your way, you must have pleased God, and you deserved a reward. So then they would proclaim days of Thanksgiving. There would be 3 days of eating a lot, engaging in fun things and recreation, and even excessive drinking. Remember, that was before the idea was invented that drinking alcohol is a sin. Remember, we talked about that before. That did not come up until 1800s. So this was a couple hundred years before they decided drinking was a sin. But remember, these were not seen as religious observances. They were secular things and that they did not happen in church, but the reason for them had to do with religion. That's where the idea for Thanksgiving came from when the Pilgrims originally had it in 1621. Now, it's important to realize that there were other Puritans here, other than the Puritans we call the Pilgrims, and there were also other Calvinists here, other groups of Calvinists that were not Puritans. Most of the early settlers to the United States that came from England were Calvinists of one stripe or another. And all these people had days of fasting and days of Thanksgiving. The one we associate with was the Pilgrims in 1621, but there was one held in Maine in 1607. There was one held in Jamestown in 1607 and in 1610. And the Pilgrims actually had another bigger Thanksgiving in 1623. And so these days of Thanksgiving were held sporadically over the years whenever a group of colonists thought that God was pleased with them. Now this idea is very similar to ancient pagan celebrations of Thanksgiving that we see all over the world. If things go well, people believe that means the gods have looked favorable upon them, and so you want to thank the gods, and hopefully then they'll want to do more good things for you. That's one vein that our modern Thanksgiving came from, and there's another vein that our modern Thanksgiving came from. In the year 1788, the United States Constitution was ratified by the last state. And Congress passed a resolution that in 1789 we would observe an official day of Thanksgiving for the Constitution. That was just a one-time thing, a one-time day of Thanksgiving for the Constitution. And after that, various presidents would proclaim days of Thanksgiving for one reason or another. In 1863, after the Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg, Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving for the fourth Thursday in November to be repeated every year. And that originated as a day of Thanksgiving for the Union victory at Gettysburg. And that lasted until in the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt changed it to the third Thursday, but the change met with so much resistance that Congress passed a law and made it the fourth Thursday. That happened in 1941, and that's where it's been ever since. The law that Congress passed was for a general day of national Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday in November. And that's why we have it. It's a day of general Thanksgiving for whatever you want to be thankful for. It's not restricted to Christians. It can be anybody, any religion or no religion. But it's a general day of Thanksgiving. Now, one thing that is often associated with Thanksgiving is families. It's often a day when families gather together. It must be probably the biggest day because I've read that the time around Thanksgiving is the busiest season of the year for air travel. That's even busier than Christmas. So a lot of people must get together on Thanksgiving. And thinking of families, I ran across something very interesting a couple of weeks ago that really shocked me, and I thought you might be interested in it too. It's no surprise that Christianity is declining in the United States and churches are losing members. Many of us have personal experience with that. They're closing. Many churches struggling to keep open. They're dealing with declining attendance. In the late 1940s, over 3/4 of all Americans were members of the church. Today, less than half of all Americans are members of the church. That's a pretty big drop, but attendance has gone down even more. In 1950, more than 50% of all Americans were in church on any given Sunday. And today that figure stands at only 15%. So that's a tremendous drop. It's reflected in the membership statistics for the various denominations. In 1983, the Presbyterian Church USA had 3.1 million members. Today they have 1.1. That's a drop of 2/3. Other denominations like the Episcopal Church in America, the Lutheran Church, have had similar declines. The United Methodist Church has not lost as many as those denominations, but they are losing members and their decline is increasing. Even the Southern Baptist, which is the largest Protestant denomination, has lost 3 million members since 2006. And so people are leaving Christianity today. Over 1/3 of American adults claim no religious affiliation. That is the category of the nones, N-O-N-E-S. It includes atheists, but it also includes people who claim to be spiritual but not religious. In other words, not religious in the sense that they do not identify with any religion. They do not identify with Christianity, with Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, or what have you. They're just spiritual. In this category of nones, which presently comprises almost 1/3 of Americans, is increasing. Most of the people who still identify themselves as Christians are older. For example, 1/3 of Presbyterians are over age 71. And when you get down to the people who actually attend church, the figures are even more striking. The average age of people sitting in a church on Sunday morning is 65 plus. You can see that in here. It's true. Younger people are deserting Christianity. Now, there has been a lot of hullabaloo lately about so-called contemporary churches, about their ability to attract younger people. In the religious world, these churches are called performance churches. That's the technical term for them. They have a stage, and their service consists of a performance before the sermon. And it's often complete with light shows, with multiple video screens, and special effects. It's similar to what you would see at a pop singer concert in Charlotte, like at the Verizon Amphitheater or something. Now, there are a few of those churches in Cleveland County, and there's no denying that they attract some people. But for all the hullabaloo over those churches, if you look at the national statistics, churches like that are attractive only to about 2 to 3% of the population. That means that 97% of the people ain't going to go. So obviously, churches like that are not the solution to the decline of Christianity. Now, for many years, there's been speculation about why Christianity is so shrinking like it is. Everyone has an opinion on it, and everyone's opinion is what they want it to be. So I never paid that stuff much attention. All the talk about why people were dropping out. Some said it was because the denominations refused to accept openly homosexual people. But the fact is that the denominations that do accept open homosexuals are the ones that are declining most rapidly. Others said it was because the denominations took political positions opposite to what young people were wanting. But again, the denominations that took political positions that are supposedly in line with young people are the ones today that are declining most rapidly. The denominations that went along with every change in society, that changed in order to keep up with what was current in society, are the very ones today that are declining the most rapidly. And that's why it was interesting for me to finally see a reputable study that addressed the issue of why people are leaving Christianity. It was not in any way what I expected it to be. It surprised me. It's something I never would have guessed. The people who are most likely to stay in Christianity, regardless of denomination, and also regardless of age, are people who were raised in homes where the mother and father were continuously married. People who came from broken homes, that is, homes where the mother and father were either divorced or never married, were more likely to leave. And that includes people whose parents were married to others. There's step-families. That includes step-families. It wasn't just that the mother needed to be married. It's that the mother needed to be married to the father of her children. Now, of course, that does not mean that if a mother and father remain continuously married, their children will remain active Christians for the rest of their lives. We all know lots of examples of people whose parents are and were married but dropped out of Christianity. But the fact remains that when the authors of this study looked at snapshots of people sitting in congregations on any given Sunday, the biggest thing that linked them all, regardless of age and regardless of denomination, was whether their mother and father had been continuously married. In some cases of the study, over 90% of those sitting in a church on any given Sunday morning came from families whose parents had been continuously married. So it seems from this study that the best thing we could do, most of all, to keep people in Christianity is to encourage families where the mother and father are married and remain married. That's no guarantee, but that's a good pointer toward what's going to happen. The marriage rate today in the United States is the lowest on record. In the late 1940s, the marriage rate was 16 per 1,000 people. In the Great Depression, in the depths of the Great Depression, the marriage rate was 8. Today it is 6. That's a 2/3 decline since the 1940s, and the marriage rate today is lower than it even was in the Great Depression. In 1950, 80% of all American households consisted of a married man and woman. Today, less than 50% of American households consist of a married man and woman. Did you know today that 40% of all children in the United States are born to parents who are not married? 40%. And what is most depressing to me, only 29% of Americans say it is important for parents of children to be married. Less than 1/3 of Americans believe it is important for parents of children to be married. What in the world happened? What happened? One thing is finances. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath home around where we live. Just an average house you'd expect a middle-class family with children to live in. House like probably most of us grew up in. $280,000 more. Somebody put a house on the market near us not long ago for $450,000 that only has a little bit of property on it. It's not that much bigger than ours, and it's even done sold. Now, for all the hullabaloo over all these good-paying jobs supposedly coming to Cleveland County, even if you get a job paying $25 to $30 an hour, you can't afford $280,000 for a house. Can't afford it. No way in the world. More and more young people simply cannot afford to get married and have children. Our society is increasingly becoming a two-class society. There's people like us who have it pretty good, and then there's people just starting out. People for whom marriage, home ownership, and raising children are things they can't afford and probably never will be able to afford. The American dream is forever out of reach for more and more people in our society. But you know, it's people like us, the people for whom things are going pretty well, who control things. And since things are going well for us, we don't see any reason for things to change. And so they don't. But there's an increasing proportion of Americans for whom things are not going well. And no one is doing anything to change it. In fact, if the truth were told, no one really knows what to do to change it. That's the problem, I think. But there's more to it than just financing. Remember, we saw that less than a third of Americans believe it is important for the parents of children to be married. What happened? You know, Wanda and I have talked about the way society is declining. And you know, we were talking about it one night and we had a realization. Our generation is the one who raised the ones who are responsible for the decline of society. That's true. Our generation raised those now that are responsible for most of the decline of society. What in the world did our generation do? Where did our generation drop the ball? When? Or was it our parents who somehow dropped the ball? I don't know what happened, but something did. Somewhere or another, somebody dropped the ball. Somewhere along the line, we did not pass our culture along to our next generation. When you have less than a third of Americans who say that marriage is important if you're going to raise a family, there's something wrong. When you have a society when 40% of all children are born to unmarried people, there's something wrong. When you have a society where an able-bodied man and woman cannot go out and get a job and afford a decent standard of living and raise children, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And when you have only 15% of Americans in church on Sunday morning, there's something wrong. That's odd, I know. But it seems like the biggest thing we could do, if we're concerned about Christianity dying out, is to support marriage in the family. Because that seems to be the key for keeping people within Christianity. Now this year at Thanksgiving, I hope we will all be thankful for the lives we have. I know I'm thankful for my life. I'm thankful for Wanda. I'm thankful for all of y'all. I'm thankful for our friends. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for where I live. I'm thankful for so many things in my life, and I'm able to stand up here. And I don't take all that stuff for granted. We know how fortunate we are. I hope we'll also remember, though, that there's an increasing proportion of Americans who do not have the lives we have, and who will never have the lives we have. I hope we'll also remember that some of the underpinnings of our society have been knocked out, somewhere or another. And unless something changes, our society will be altered in ways we cannot even imagine right now. For this year at Thanksgiving, this is the thought I'd like to leave you with. It's something Jesus said in the Gospel of Luke. From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required.